Hey guys, thanks for joining my video today. My name's Don, and today I want to talk about an easier way to fish for us old guys. Now, I've mentioned before I'm 77, going to be 78 this year, and I got to tell you, going out in the boat all day and trying to cast lures and not being as good a caster as I used to be, I get snagged up from time to time. Go through the frustration of taking that electric motor, getting in there and getting that lure back, and if I can't, then I gotta tie off again. Fortunately, I have other rods with me, so I may just change baits altogether and go to another bait that's already tied on because in all likelihood I probably forgot my reading glasses, so probably can't see that little line to get it through the hook anyway. But there is an easy solution, and I'm sure a lot of you've already figured out what it is. Maybe you've tried it, but it's what I call live bait fishing, shiner fishing. You know, for years I ran a guide service, bass fishing guide service, probably 20 plus years, and I fished a lot of the local lakes. My primary lake was Lake Istapoca in Highlands County. Occasionally, I'd run down to Okeechobee or, up to some of the hot lakes over on the coast, Garcia, the Stick Marsh. But usually, I stayed pretty close to home. But I always fished with artificials. Uh, I never fished with shiners, and the biggest reason I never fished with them is, to me, I just didn't see that as really being bass fishing. Uh, it just almost felt like you were cheating. And again, I'm not trying to say anything negative about the guides that are using shiners because it's a great way to fish. Um, and during my time here that I've spent as a guide using artificial baits, there were a couple of times where I actually went out with a couple of different guys and we fished with shiners, specifically with Remo Beaver here in on Lake Istapoca, and we had a hell of a good time. I mean, I'll bet you we caught anywhere from 30 to 40 bass, and probably only moved twice. It was just ridiculous, the amount of activity as compared to a normal day where I might go out and only catch two or three fish. So it's a great alternative, and the downside to it, if there is a downside, is you can't always find wild shiners. Back when I had a fishing tackle store, both times here in Florida, the challenge I faced is I actually would have them for a while and then I wouldn't have them. Uh, there's a certain seasonality to guys that go out and catch shiners, and their lifespan isn't usually real long, so it's hard to keep them very long in a tackle shop. If the guys that catch them know how to cure them, they'll last a little bit longer. But the truth is, when you get them, when I used to get them, and I'd get 20 dozen, sometimes 30 dozen at a time, and be sold out in 2 or 3 days. So obviously, a lot of people use fish with shiners. Uh, but again, it's a whole different way of fishing. Unlike going out and fishing with artificials, again, whether you're flipping and pitching or you're casting, whatever you might be doing, even if you're fishing slow, uh, using a Carolina rig or drop shotting in deeper water, all of those types of fishing, I think, are a little harder than shiner fishing. I mean, shiner fishing couldn't be much easier. You hook the shiner either in the lip, through the back, through the tail, throw him out. Usually it's kind of a lob cast. Let him sit with a float and just relax. It might be 5 minutes, it might be an hour. It's anybody's guess how long it's going to take. But it's fun to watch that bobber, and it's fun to actually see the activity as the bass comes along. The shiner gets spooked, and pretty soon you see that shiner moving, the bobber's moving, and then all of a sudden that bobber goes under, and you let him run for a few minutes, and then you set back. And because most of the guys using live bait, using fishing with golden shiners, most of them are using what they call circle hooks. And the benefit to a circle hook is you really don't have to set the hook. It'll set itself just in the shape because of the shape of it. So if you're using a shiner hook with or a circle hook with a shiner, the likelihood is if you just lift your rod, you're probably going to hook the bass. It's a lot of fun. And I got to tell you, your chance of catching a really big bass are extremely high. A lot of the guys that fish with shiners all the time, they tell me the best choice is the large shiners. And I know a couple of guys and they only fish with, 8, 9-inch, 10-inch shiners. And I mean, you're talking about a big bait. Has to be a pretty good sized fish to eat, a shiner that's that big. Although I have to admit, I've used some big shiners before, and I've caught some relatively small bass, 2 and 3 pounders. A bass often has a pretty good appetite, and sometimes they think they can eat something larger than what they can. But if you're going to fish with shiners, there are a few things you need to understand. Number one, you've got to have a pretty stout rod because you don't know what's going to be on the end of it. And there's a good chance it's going to be a big fish. So I don't recommend spinning outfits only because most of the spinning outfits that we use for bass fishing are lighter. And they're lighter for a reason because we typically use them more out in the deeper water for drop shotting. Not to say that you can't catch a big fish on a spinning outfit. You can. I actually use a spinning outfit, but it's a very heavy duty, very, very heavy duty spinning rod. And I use a 3000 series reel. In fact, I've got a 4000 as well. And I've got it loaded up with fluorocarbon, but I'm using, 20, 25 pound test fluorocarbon. I do have one rod rigged up with braided line. And on that particular rod, I usually run a short monofilament leader on it, but I use that rod more if I'm out in heavy vegetation where I know the chances are good that the shiner is going to end up going into the pads or into the reeds, and I want to be able to get them out. But again, it's a great alternative, and I think the cost is a factor. And for those of us that are on a fixed income, uh, it's tough to go out and spend, 50 bucks on a bunch of shiners. It's interesting. Most of the guides that go out, they're buying shiners, and I can remember a couple of them telling me they won't go out on a trip without at least 5 dozen shiners. So, when you think about that, if a dozen shiners, wild shiners, if they're going to run you $20 to $25 for a dozen, and you're going to take 5 dozen, you've just tacked on about $125 to the trip. Whether you've hired a guide or whether you're doing it on your own, that's usually on your nickel. So that's something to think about. Um, the the other thing I would mention is you want to make sure if you're going to go with shiners that you keep them well aerated and you keep them in a container, whether it's your live well or a separate container, where you make sure they get a lot of air. Because if they're actually cured shiners, they'll hold up pretty good. But if they're shiners that somebody just caught or maybe you caught them and you're going to use them, the same day or the same time that you caught them, they're going to foul the water pretty fast. And that's really the process involved with curing them is just let them clean out their systems. And when they do, that water gets really dirty and really fast. I've had people ask me, will a bass hit a dead shiner? Well, the few times that I've fished with shiners, I can tell you they will, because you can easily impart a little bit of action to the shiner. And when I've been out with Remo or with a couple other guys where we did some shiner fishing, you know, if by the end of the day you're down to just the last couple of shiners and they're dead, don't be afraid to use them, because once you throw them out there and you twitch them a couple of times, they look like they're alive anyway. And even if they kind of seesaw on their way to the bottom, sometimes that's exactly what a big bass is looking for, a really easy meal. So anyway, there's a lot of other live bait choices: night crawlers, crickets, grasshoppers. Uh, you can get into redworms and maggots and waxworms. Those are typically reserved more for bluegills, but shiners tend to be the best bait if you're going to go live bait fishing for largemouth bass. And again, make sure that you understand the distinction between domestic shiners and wild shiners. Wild shiners typically are golden shiners. Uh, we have them in our lakes. A lot of the lakes are full of them. Some of the lakes in particular have a huge population of wild golden shiners, and it's the number one choice for bass. Uh, but not all lakes are created equal, and not all lakes have golden shiners. But the other thing you have to watch out for is on the domestics. They're cheaper usually, but they come from Arkansas, and they're really just big minnows. They rarely get beyond 3 to 4 inches. You might find an occasional 5 incher, and they're usually a bright silver as compared to the wild shiners that have more of a yellowish copper tint to them. But the wild golden shiners will get big. I mean, they'll easily get up to 8, 9, 10 inches and beyond. But there is a difference in price. So if you see a tackle shop advertising shiners for $12, $15 a dozen, the chances are they're domestics. The other difference is the domestics require colder water. Because they're coming from Arkansas. It's just like the minnows that a lot of the tackle shops sell. They need to be in 55 to 60 degree water, which is okay, certain times of the year. But when you get into the warmer times of the year, particularly in the spring and summer, fall, you go out and you buy a dozen domestic shiners that have to be kept in 55 degree water, and the water temperature is 75 or 80, you're going to have a problem. They're not going to live very long. On the other hand, wild domestic shiners, wild golden shiners, typically come right out of the lakes. So whatever the water temperature is in the lake, they're usually fine with that. Remember, they're cold-blooded creatures, so most of them are going to acclimate to the water temperature that they're in. But going from 55 to 75 can be a huge shock, and a lot of times they can't recover from that. So one last thing I might mention, there's a guy I've watched a few times on YouTube. I believe he's called the North Florida Fisherman, and he doesn't just fish for bass; he fishes for everything. He's got a tremendous portfolio of videos. I don't know him personally. I've watched quite a few of his videos, but he goes out, he catches tarpon, he catches redfish, sailfish, a lot of saltwater videos. But the ones I really enjoy are when he goes after largemouth bass. And he'll tell you exactly the equipment he's using. And like I've done so many times with other guys that I'm impressed with, I actually bought a couple of the rods he recommends. They're actually saltwater rods. I bought the same reels. I'm using the same line. And although I rarely fish with wild shiners. I'm set up for it. And of course, I've set up 2 different outfits. But if you watch this guy, he does a great job, with these videos. And I'm telling you, I remember one video I watched in particular where he mentioned he was going to go out. He took 5 days off or 7 days off from work. He was going to go out and try to catch a new state record, a new record for the state of Florida. And, he tells you right up front, the size of the bait he's using. He shows you how to rig it. But he films the whole thing. And although he didn't catch, anything even close to the state record, he caught some really big bass. And he's got it all filmed. So if you like to see somebody catching really big fish, you might want to tune in. Again, I believe it's called the North Florida Fisherman, and I guarantee you'll enjoy watching him. But that's all I have today, folks. So I hope you enjoyed the video. And by all means, you older guys, if you want to slow things down a little bit, you want to relax a little bit more, maybe eat a sandwich while you're fishing, shiner fishing might be the way to go. In fact, now that I've been talking about it, I think I might just go pick up some shiners and do a little bit of it myself. So thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up. I'm looking for people to subscribe to the channel. I got a lot more stories, a lot more videos coming. And if you have any comments, please list them below and I'll try to get back to you. Thanks again. Appreciate your checking in today.